right, shalom. Shalom, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Jehovah's sight. He is our strength and our redeemer. And it's in his name, which is his authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Amen. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being on with us. Appreciate you. Sorry it took me a little long to get on. But we praise y'all that we were able to make it on. And today we're going to kind of... I'm sorry?
Just to hold it. I can get it.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. But thanks everybody for being on. We appreciate you. And thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Tonight for Patreon, we're just going to kind of get into something called nostalgic trauma. Kind of based off of what we were talking about today as we kind of ended the live session. Talk about nostalgic trauma. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that there's a lot of people who go through trauma and don't realize that trauma in and of itself is actually dealing with nostalgia. Trauma is actually dealing with nostalgia. Trauma is actually dealing with many of us who are going through a lot of different stuff, and we're bringing up things from our past. And we're bringing things up from our past and just going, well, the assumption is that since it's from my past, that should, it should be something that comes up. And we also make an assumption that nostalgic is always positive, right? We always make an assumption that if I'm bringing it back, it must be because it's positive. But a lot of times we're bringing it back because it's our default setting, right? A lot of times we're bringing this stuff back because it's just kind of how we see things in our default. It's what we have, So you have people talking about reminiscing on getting hit or getting spankings, or reminiscing on how they used to curse people out, or reminiscing on how somebody did them dirty, whatever, right? But really what you're really doing is just you're really reminiscing or bringing back things that are nostalgic, but they're negative. And we make an assumption that because we're going through nostalgia, it must be a positive thing, or because we're bringing it up. And there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of trauma. So we're talking about today nostalgic trauma, right? That your trauma can be nostalgic, and you can be looking at your trauma a certain way, or assuming that your trauma is supposed to go a certain way, or a certain thing is supposed to be done, due to the fact that it's just coming up. And a lot of people just go, well, since it's coming up, since it's there, it must be something that's positive, or it must be something that's fun, or it must be something that we should go ahead and be gleeful about. And really, you're just bringing up things that kind of hurt. And here's the deal. A lot of times, people either don't admit to trauma, or sometimes we don't even realize that something is traumatic. Because just because you've been through something traumatic and you're ignorant of it doesn't mean that your ignorance takes away the consequence, right? The ignorance of trauma is not something that is going to ensure that therefore we won't deal with consequences, right? People will say stuff like, well, what you know won't hurt you, but that's not true. Like, just because you don't know that you've had something that's not positive for your life doesn't mean that you're not going to deal with any negativity, right? But a lot of us kind of have this weird perspective, like, hey, because it's something new, or because I'm going through this, I always go through this, and I'm able to function, right? But you can be a functioning alcoholic, you can be a functioning depressed person, you can be a functioning, you can be a functioning, I don't know. Well, I don't want to use the terminology, but somebody who's looking at taking their, not allowing themselves to continue to move forward and live on, so to speak. You can function in a lot of different ways. Many people function and are still not where they need to be. And a lot of times we're bringing back certain things in our lives and not dealing with the fact that a lot of the stuff we're bringing back or bringing up is because it's nostalgic. It's just simply something that we remember very well, right? Or even if we don't remember, we remember very well. It doesn't have to be something that we remember fondly, but we have a very great memory when it comes to some of these things. So we had this great memory, and we had this memory of we can remember very well all the times that we got yelled at. So now your children are acting up. And what do? You do the same thing to your children that your parents did to you, right? Your children are acting up, so you go, okay, this is what my parents did to me, so this is what I'm going to do to them, right? Whether it was righteous or not, right? If it was great enough for me, it's great enough for you. Or Some of us, because we've gone through trauma, we actually go the opposite route. Some people will go, well, I didn't like it when my parents did it to me, so I'm not going to do it to my child. But what if your child needs what your parent did to you? Because all of us are different people. So you have a lot of people who are going through all this stuff, and when you're trying to go through these things, a lot of people are bringing up trauma, and are
GasBuddy.com.
a lot of people are sorry. So a lot of people are trying their best to experience different things, or to go through different experiences, and they're dealing with trauma. And the trauma is nostalgic. They can bring it up like it was yesterday. They can tell you why it's okay to let it keep sitting. They can tell you why the Most High. They can even give you excuses as to why the Most High allows it. Right? Like, think about how many guys were messed over in relationships. And since you were messed over in relationships, what do? You take that out on the person you're with now. So now you're dealing with your trauma by basically bringing it up every time on somebody else. And because somebody else feels traumatic, right? You think that it's okay. Somebody says, I don't get what you're saying. And I know I'm all over the place a little bit. I'm kind of unfocused, but we're gonna get this together. But yeah, like, so what do I mean by the last point I was making? So let's say you're sitting there and you're trying to deal with whatever. You've been traumatized, you were mistreated. So you start mistreating your spouse. You start mistreating your friend, and your friend, your spouse, whomever, goes, hey, like, I don't really like that or whatever. Why do you think this and that or whatever? You say, man, whatever. If you knew all the stuff I had to go through, man, stop being the punk. Stop being, the P word, the 5-letter P word that I'm not going to say right now. But, stop being a punk. Stop being P. Stop being somebody who's not, stop being scared. Stop, be brave, be courageous, be a man. Some people even hit you with, be a man. You're not being a man. And we're not realizing that we're basically just saying, because I went through something that was traumatic and I made it through, that doesn't mean that I should have even went through that in the first place. We're putting our trauma on somebody else, right? We're busy putting on our trauma on somebody else and saying that, hey, because I made it through something traumatic, it means that you should be able to make it through something traumatic, right? I made it through whippings, so you should get whippings. I couldn't sit down at the end of a whipping, so you should be able to take it, right? I used to have people yell at me, and even though I know that it's verbally abusive, like, you know what, like, stop being punk, this and that or whatever, it's not verbally abusive. That's just the way that, parents do. But, like, just because you went through it and survived it doesn't mean that it was righteous. And we had this weird philosophy, like, we're assuming that these things are righteous. We're assuming that just because remember we talk about all the time, I don't care about being right, but I care about being righteous. Just because something was done and that was right in your house, it doesn't mean it was righteous all the time, or any of the time necessarily, right? So you have to start raising your child. You have to start raising yourself back up into whom you're supposed to be. You have to start becoming who you were called to be, and you have to do so by any means necessary. One of the things that's going to have to happen, one of the means that's going to have to take place, is that you're going to have to stop allowing nostalgia to guide you just on its face. Just because it happened to you before doesn't mean that you should keep it up, right? This is the reason, by the way, for, like, if we can use this, right, to just use this catapult into something a little deeper. This is the reason why a lot of people have a problem with coming away from the name of Jesus. We know that it's not his name. You can explain it to somebody pretty easily. That cannot be his name, right? But what are they really doing? Somebody told them something and they're nostalgic about it. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's correct. Doesn't matter if it's right. Doesn't matter if it's actually going to cause them to be able to learn, right? In their mind, this is what mama did. This is what grandmama did. So since this is what they did, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say. Why you got anything to say about it, right? This is how people treat it. But the reality is that, you got to be in position right? Where you don't allow nostalgia to be your only guide. Am I doing this because it's a principle? Am I doing this because it's righteous? Am I doing this because it helps the collective? Am I doing this because it's healing? Am I doing this because it's nurturing? Am I doing this because this is natural affection? Or am I doing this just simply because I have trauma? A lot of people move in trauma so much that they believe that the traumatic movement is more important than the healing. Right? A lot of people move in trauma. Right? A lot, for example, a lot of us will have, those creaks, pains, aches, and stuff, and we just go, well, that's just a sign of me getting old. No, like your body's gone through trauma, right? But what you've been told or taught or in your mind, what you say is, well, everybody else, you're just supposed to deal with aches and pains like that as you get older. And sure, some of that happens, but there are certain things we shouldn't be experiencing at certain ages, but we just assume that we're supposed to experience it. So we start experiencing those things and we go through a lot of trauma. And while we're going through the trauma, we just go ahead and say, well, yeah, I'm just supposed to have this ache and pain. Well, what if you have you tried any, like men and women start having issues with sexual activity, right? We go, oh, it's because we're older. Well, have you tried, like ashwagandha, or have you tried like okra or something? Have you tried, what's the one I'm really looking, I'm skipping, figs. Have you tried, like something simple, right? But we're so used to trauma, or as trauma being a part of our lives, and we're so used to trauma being a normalcy for many of us, that we just go, oh, okay, I guess I'm just supposed to have certain traumas when I get older. And what do we base that off of? We base that off of other people that came before us and their trauma. We base it off of other people before them and their trauma when they came before us. So everybody told us that you're supposed to have this trauma when you get this age. So their norm, right? What they say is a necessity for your life. You actually bring up their nostalgia. Their nostalgia has become yours. Now, you have not experienced those things yet, but you are going off of what somebody else says. So you're using what somebody else is nostalgic about to be able to say, this is who I am. Think about that, right? I guess I'm going to have to just deal with pain when I get to be here, because that's what you do. I guess I'm just not going to be able to, lift weights anymore when I get to this age. I guess I'm just going to have to be frustrated if I get into marriage, right? Because men ain't this and women ain't this. And some of these people are giving you traumatic experiences. Listen to guys at the barbershop who can't keep a woman anyways, trying to deal with multiple women and be players. You're dealing with women at the hair salon who are telling you all these experiences, and you can't find any men around them, right? But you're dealing with somebody else's trauma, and every time they're ready to they go right into nostalgia. Their nostalgic trauma, it gets pulled up, right? It's like the little files in the file cabinet, and they immediately and what they're doing when you ask a lot of people for direction in your life, or ask somebody for help in your life, their immediate response is, hey, go through the file cabinet that I put together, the files of my life and how I did things. Now, whether I did them righteous or not doesn't even matter for a lot of people, right? Whether you were righteous when you were dealing with this, whether you were going through some things, whether you were being obedient, whether you weren't listening at all, they just get putting their nostalgia on you. Of the chicken story? Yeah, right? Yeah, that's it. Exactly, right? Like, why is it that we cut the chicken in half? We cut the chicken in half because mama did it. Well, why did she do it? Because her mama did it. Well, why did she do it? Because her mama did it. And finally somebody had to say, well, back in the day, we did it because ovens, weren't as big, so we had to cut the chicken in half. Nostalgia, right? We're eating the chicken, so to speak. We're eating the trauma. And it's usually not ours to even have. It's usually not even ours to even eat. It's usually not even ours to have to deal with. But we're carrying stuff. And that's generational curses in a nutshell. How much trauma are you carrying that you're not even supposed to have on you? Generational curses in a nutshell. And by the way, I know that we have this public today. Normally this would be for Patreon only. So we're letting you guys in a little bit if you want to see kind of some of the stuff that we do on Patreon that maybe you guys miss out on. So thank y'all for being on. Appreciate you. And we will have we'll do one more brain dump for you guys on Patreon as well. And then for the rest of them, we're going to be on tier 2, by the way. So we'll do one more brain dump at some point tonight, and we'll make sure that that's public so you can see what that looks like as well. But thank y'all for being on. Appreciate you. Yeah, but we're dealing with a lot of stuff that's people's trauma. We're dealing with a lot of trauma, and a lot of people don't recognize what's happening with the trauma. A lot of people don't recognize, what's going on with that. A lot of people don't recognize how much it's taking effect over our lives, and how many decisions we're making based off of things that we're just bringing up as if this was normal, run-of-the-mill stuff. A lot of you are going through things that it is not normal, right? Like, you were not crazy when you were growing. Some of us grew up with stuff, and we thought to ourselves, "It's got to be crazy to be going through stuff like this." But you started saying to yourself, "Well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just not grateful. Maybe I'm not grateful for my family and the way that they operate. Maybe I'm not, living well enough. Maybe I'm not obedient enough." You get all these things that start flowing in your mind. Like, a lot of us got abused, and got church hurt. Dealing with the same kind of thought process. Well, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm off. Maybe they should be doing this. Maybe I'm not grateful enough. Maybe I do question the pastor too much. Maybe I do, do this or do that too much, right? And some of us did that, and it's like, you got to realize, like, no, maybe you're not supposed to be treated like that. Maybe this isn't the way. Maybe, we should go by his actual name. Maybe we should learn the language in which the people who were in the Bible spoke. Maybe we should be right. Like, why is that not acceptable? Why is that not acceptable? Why is it not acceptable for us to be able to be treated a certain way? And even with some of that, like, here's another thing too, you got to be careful about your nostalgia. You'll try to raise the next generation based off of what worked for you. Like, maybe it worked for you, but maybe it doesn't work for your child. Maybe it worked for your mother and father, but maybe it doesn't work for your spouse. Like, maybe those are some things that you have to think about, right? That you have to think about and say, like, maybe that didn't work. Maybe some of you were in prior marriages, whether you got divorced or whether you were, doing a boyfriend-girlfriend thing, or maybe somebody passed away or whatever. And maybe at some point some of you guys are going to feel led or decide or whatever it is to get into another relationship. But you better be careful when you're coming from your divorce or whatever and trying to do, like, I hear people say all types of wild stuff like, well, I already know how to be a wife. I learned how to be it in my past relationship. It's like, you better be careful when people say stuff like that, or when you say stuff like that, because you got a whole, like, your husband, a whole other person, your wife, a whole other person. I've made that mistake prior where, my wife does something and I automatically just start saying that she's against me or she's doing this or doing that, because in my mind I'm going back to nostalgia. I'm going back to trauma. It's nostalgic. So I have to, like, I had to be healed to that. My wife had to hang in there, be diligent and be patient with me a little bit, and also tell me sometimes that it just wasn't acceptable to, right? However, like, I had to get on board. I had to realize, like, yeah, okay, just because something happened to me before doesn't mean that it's for me to carry. Just because I went through something doesn't mean that it was right when it happened, and it doesn't mean that every single woman thinks like that, or every person that they do that, it means that that's what they're doing. But if you're not careful, that's when you get nostalgic about those things, right? And your nostalgia begins to rule you to a certain degree. Right? It begins to take over. So we want to try and make sure that we're not dealing with nostalgia on that level. We want to make sure that we're not allowing our nostalgic trauma to lead us and guide us. Right? It's not worth it. It's not holy. It's not of any value. It's not healing. It's not making anybody whole. We have to make sure that people are there, that people can actually deal with us because we can deal with ourselves. If your first place to go is to a place of hurt, if your first place every time you're going through something is go to a place of hurt, we got an issue. That's not always somebody else's fault. Sometimes it's our fault, and not even necessarily our fault all the time either. But we need to go through training. We need to have these tools. We need to have it addressed. We need to get used to saying, like, we need to even address and ask ourselves the question: where do I go to when I, like, what's my first thought process when this issue pops up, or when a money issue pops up, or when a relationship issue pops up, or when an issue with my child pops up? Like, where's my first place that I go? What is my nostalgia that pops up? And do I need to curb it a little bit? right? I mean, I might need to be able to see what's going on with that. So these are some things that we should look at, that we should be aware of, that we should appreciate, that we should be mindful of, and it'll help you to grow, right? Don't allow your trauma to be the thing that leads and guides, right? Don't allow trauma to lead and guide, right? It leads and guides a lot, and a lot of times we're unaware of it. It's like poison gas that has no smell. It eventually kills, you know. And we have to get to a point to where we stop allowing, because also too, now what happens with the trauma starts eating you up. You start dealing with cancerous stuff. You start dealing with heart attacks. You got stress. You got thyroid issues, right? You have all this different stuff that pops up, right? You have all this stuff that just kind of pops up. Yeah, you're on autopilot in a sense. Like you have all these different things that just keep popping up, and it's not valuable. It's not really helping. It's not really guiding you. It's not really leading you, at least positively. So, you know, what's that? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present yourselves a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is a reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but what we were talking about last night, but be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. By the renewing of your mind, that means that I need to constantly renew. I need to go over things every day, and I need to say, what is it that I'm carrying today? Like, I did a great work getting rid of this today. Now what do I need to get rid of tomorrow? Or I did a great work at seeing where I am. Have I backtracked? Is there something that happened to me today that made me go to a default that's traumatic, a traumatic default? Is there a situation that you went through with the person that you were arguing with, and y'all been straight for 2 years, but now you have a little beef, and it reminds you of it, like the valley of the shadow of death. The shadow of it reminds you of something, so now you're going back to, see, it's not changing in this and that, but for 2 years y'all been straight, right? Like, what is it that's going on as far as the nostalgia, or the traumatic nostalgia that's coming, right? Like, what's happening in your life? You have to reevaluate. Yeah, you got to cast down those imaginations. And if it takes all day, you cast down those imaginations. You do what you got to do, right? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? Right? We cast down all imaginations, all these strongholds, right? All the spiritual wickedness in high places, right? This is a perversion of the will of Yah for your life. For you to be stuck in some of the stuff you're stuck in, to be stuck in trauma like that, it's a perversion of the will of Yah in your life. Right. If you're watch this, trauma freezes you, and I got to get ready to take my leave so we can be ready for the live session a little bit. When trauma freezes you, right? If you're dealing with traumatic experiences, your body, if you're dealing with traumatic experiences, you know, literally your body's not digesting food correctly. Your body's not getting rid of waste. You're not breathing properly because your body is stressed out. Your body doesn't know the difference between being stressed out because you're being chased by a bear, or you being stressed out because you got a couple bills that are past due. Your body has no clue how to deal with those things. Your body just knows I'm stressed, and when your body's stressed, it starts to make sure that it takes care of itself. When it starts to take care of itself, it starts doing things like shutting parts down. Like, for example, when you are freezing outside and people start getting frostbite, you know, basically that's your body stressed out. I mean, it's in an extreme manner, but your body goes, okay, I don't know what's going on, but it's freezing outside. I'm starting to, and I don't know what I need to do, but I'm going to shut down parts of the body so I can make sure that the torso is taken care of. So it starts working from the outside in. It says, okay, fingertips, toes, y'all got to go. After that, it says hands, feet, hey. It says after that, arms, you might have to go too. And eventually all you can do is sit there and it starts making real decisions, because the only thing you got left is basically what? The lungs, the heart, and the brain. And at a certain point, it'll make you kind of go, I won't say brain dead, but it'll just make sure that the brain functions just enough to ensure that you're able to get what you need, as far as it'll make sure that you get what you need to get, as far as excuse me, as far as just making sure that the heartbeats and the lungs are going. Everything else, as far as you thinking, dreaming, whatever, it'll just shut down, because it's like we ain't got time for all that. We stressed out, right? But your body does the same thing, same kind of thing when you're going through all this trauma. It freezes up, it seizes up on you, and you can't move past the trauma. You got to fix the trauma. Your body, your spirit, your soul, everything is dependent on you getting past this trauma, right? This is why we've given certain exercises and stuff in the past, as far as breathing exercises, as far as counting sheep. Even people think that that's ridiculous, but hey, if it helps you to sleep, getting some melatonin in your life and some, and making sure that you use it properly, having serotonin if you're having problems focusing, if you feel scatterbrained, all these different things or whatever. Of course, prayer, but also being prayer and focusing prayer and making sure that what I'm praying, I'm also trying to live. And also, and we'll take our leave after this, also, make sure you don't condemn yourself all the time if you fall. Because a lot of people are so stressed out about making a mistake. Sure, make sure that everything you do is honorable and that the Most High is there with you and for you. However, don't be so stressed out if you make a mistake. It's okay for you to make a mistake, right? It's okay for you if it's like a lot of you getting into doing these holy days for the first time. If you make a mistake, okay. Matter of fact, we're in the land of our captivity, so there's certain things you cannot do the way that you're supposed to do anyways right now. Do the best that you can. Right? Do the best that you can, be obedient. And sometimes we're so stressed out, and when you get stressed out, you start going to what you're nostalgic for. And a lot of people still haven't dealt with their, some of those demons in the closet, so to speak. And wherever you were in life where the trauma happened, if you were 5 years old, I don't care if you're 35, if you were 5 years old, then you still have 30 years of growth in that area, and you can't really grow correctly till that trauma's gone. Right? People who just yell and can't talk, and they're missing some of that emotional IQ that they should be able to have in a conversation. They just start yelling. A lot of times it's because you're dealing with trauma in the area, and it's never been dealt with, so you don't know how to communicate. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We did a little special extra for Patreon today. Normally these are on Patreon only, and after a little bit this will probably be on Patreon only. But if you're interested in getting more stuff like this or other things that we offer there, I believe it's $5 a month. Allows us to be able to do what we do. We'll have the second tier stuff as far as the brain dump stuff. I'll do one more, and the last one I do will be public, so you can see that one as well. And that'll be tier 2. And so for those that want to be tier 2 to bless us and help us to be able to do things that we're doing around the world and moving, hopefully this will be something that maybe motivates you to be able to help a little bit. You'll be surprised, $5, $10, what it does to be able to bless the kingdom, and some of the stuff that we don't need to lean on SOC for, so to speak, to make sure that it happens. So we thank you, we honor you, we appreciate you, we're praying for you. We hope that everybody's doing well, and we look forward to talking to you soon. I'll hopefully see you guys on the live on Kofi_42 on TikTok. And until next time I have a chance to be before you, remember that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we're just all of us working together. You'll be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, family. Peace.